is no stranger to ICP. In fact, many of you will remember her from our council meeting last year at the Shanghai Convention. Anna coordinates the TALIS video study and global teaching insights at the OECD Directorate for Education and Skills. She co-authored the report Equity and Quality in Education, which identifies systems and school-level policies and practice for supporting disadvantaged schools and students. This session will provide a comparative international perspective on the long shadow that COVID-19 crisis has cast on our school systems and the risks that further closures present to students, teachers, and schools.
Good morning, good afternoon, good night to all of you, wherever you are. My name is Anna Pons, and I've been working at the OECD for more than 10 years, looking at leadership, teaching, and learning matters. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and I would like to give a special thanks to the organizers for putting this program and this conference together. I believe that in the current challenging times, it's more important than ever to stay together, to collaborate, to support each other. So this conference is more needed than ever. And I would also like to thank all of you as well for your interest in this session. What I'm going to do today is talk a bit about the evidence that we have in terms of the extent of disruption as well as opportunity in the school system. And as you know, the COVID-19 pandemic has not stopped at national borders, and it has affected people regardless of their nationality, their level of education, their income, or their gender. And this might not be true for the consequences of the pandemic. Those that come from most vulnerable backgrounds that have less resources to ensure learning continuity are likely to be hit the hardest. So I would like to place a special focus during this session on equity matters. This crisis has exposed the deep inequities of our education systems. Inequity related to access to broadband, access to computers, access to supportive environments, or inequity related to where the most talented professionals are placed, in which schools do they work. And while it may seem that in this crisis, these inequities are being amplified, I would like to make the case that this is also a moment, an opportunity to rebel against these inequities, to question the status quo, and to work collectively to make sure that when we go back to a normality, we don't go back to the old inequitable one. I remember almost a year ago when I had the privilege to be in Shanghai and attend the ICP convention. I remember that the title of the convention was Creating a New Future. It was about leadership for transformation. We've been talking about how to improve education and how to make big change happen for many, many years. The current moment might seem a moment where we are struggling for survival, where leadership is about resilience, where leadership is about making sure that we end every day. But I would like to make the case in this presentation that the current crisis also can potentially open an opportunity to a stronger future, an opportunity to determine what our schools look like tomorrow. But let me start by showing you some data about the shadow of the pandemic. Let me share my screen. Perfect. So at the end of June, the UNESCO, which had been collecting data on school closures, determined that about schools in OECD countries had been closed for an average of 14 weeks. And what this means is that 1.7 billion children and youth as well as the lives of their families were disrupted for this period of time. At the moment, schools in many countries are reopening and are facing the new challenges related to the reopening. And I would like to show you some data so that we can discuss the extent to which we were prepared for these closures and we are prepared for the reopening. So in 2018, before the pandemic, we asked students in PISA, which is the program of international student assessment, carried out in more than 80 countries, which cloud all this chart, as you can see. We asked students whether they had access to a quiet place to study at home. And what they said, on average across OECD countries, only 1 in 10 students did not have access to a quiet place to study. Of course, this is not the same in developing countries like Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, or Indonesia, where it was up to 4 out of 10 students. Similarly, we also asked students in PISA whether they had internet at home. And again, the vast majority of students in OECD countries do have internet at home, but many of them do not in developing countries. When it comes on whether they have a device, whether they had a computer for schoolwork, we see that 1 in 5 across OECD countries did not have access to a computer to work on at home. And this proportion is much, much larger in developing countries. For example, if we look at Indonesia, it was just 30% of students that said that they had a computer to do schoolwork at home. In PISA 2018, we also asked school principals about their views. We asked them whether they felt that their teachers had the technical and pedagogical skills to integrate digital devices in instruction. And as you can see, from 1 to 5 out of 10 considered that teachers did not have such skills. We also asked principals on whether schools had an effective online learning platform available. And back then, in 2018, the majority of schools did not have an effective online learning platform. This percentage varies from 2/3 to just 1/3. And of course, there are some countries where most schools had such platform. For example, if we look at Singapore or China or Denmark, almost all the schools, more than 9 out of 10, had an online learning platform available. Overall, when we ask a school principal about shortage of ICTs in schools, half of them reported that there was a shortage that could hinder instruction. But again, these numbers are about 2018, and as we know, the situation has changed dramatically during these last months, during this year. And at the OECD, together with Harvard University, we conducted a rapid survey to try to identify what were the main changes, what were the main initiatives that were being put into place to support students, to support teachers in these challenging times. And what we observe is that there has been extraordinary actions, extraordinary initiatives from students, teachers, school leaders, and governments to overcome these challenges that were completely unexpected and for which, as the data that I've shown you shows, that we're not well prepared. And for example, we've seen initiatives to target training and to provide a special training to teachers on the use of e-learning platforms. We've also seen initiatives to improve access to the internet and connectivity. For example, in China, there was a cloud platform created, supported by 7,000 servers and 90 terabytes that allowed for the simultaneous connection of 50 million students. We've also seen lots of initiatives to create online learning platforms and also to supply free learning resources online. And here, for example, I would like to mention initiatives from Estonia, where the government partnered with the private sector to provide a platform to all the students, or initiatives like in France, where the distance learning program was extended to all the students so that they will all have access for free to the national curriculum. We have also seen initiatives to hand out devices to teachers and students that did not have a tablet, a laptop, or a computer at home. And we've also seen a lot of initiatives to consider alternative modes of delivery, such as radio or the TV, particularly for those students like young children that might not be able to operate by themselves and organize their learning by themselves through digital means. But despite all these extraordinary reactions and initiatives that we have all observed and that have definitely hardened our hearts, we have also observed that there is a considerable risk of disengagement and dropout, and the rate of students that are not in education and not in training programs is likely to increase in the coming years. And this is, of course, a big concern because in many countries, this rate is already very, very high. And of course, those that have lower levels of educational attainment are particularly at risk in this crisis of greater unemployment. We already know from official statistics that those that have the lower levels of education are those that are less likely to be employed. Well, the current crisis is likely to exacerbate these differences. And there's a couple of economists, Hanushek and Wasman, that have tried to quantify what is the economic impact of this crisis. Because when we hear the news, we always hear about the economic impact to our industry, to our service sector, to our economy in general. But we rarely see information about what is the impact, what is the loss to the education sector. And as you can see here in the chart, they have estimated the impact to be as high as, we're talking about billions, so it's a high impact. And of course, so far we've been talking about potential impact related to the joining the labor markets, about the economy, but when in the survey we asked whether they felt that students have been able to follow the curriculum, we found out that just half of the students were likely to have been able to follow the normal curriculum. So just half of the learning is likely to have occurred during this time of school closures. And we should not only look at the learning loss, but we should also pay attention to the significant psychological impact that social distancing and quarantine is likely to have imposed on young children, and that this is likely to have resulted in high stress, anxiety, and loneliness. And this is what young people from ages 18 to 19 to 29, are reporting, that they have far higher levels of distress compared to other age groups. So when faced with the crisis, what is that we can do? What is that school leaders can do? This crisis has been about, or we've talked a lot about technology. We've talked a lot about technology as a solution. But what I would like to underline here is that this crisis has also emphasized the importance of professionalism. Even the most well-intentioned education particular some opportunities where we see chances for school leaders to further support teachers and students. One of them relates to the potential for innovation. In these times of uncertainty, innovation might be the last thing that we want to hear about. But these times of uncertainty also provide an opportunity to do things in different ways. And facing new problems has required us to come up with new solutions, as we have all seen. And when we look at what central governments can do, what we see is that their prescriptive approach is likely to fail. What we see is that prescribing what teachers need to do in a time of crisis, where the world that used to exist no longer exists, is likely to fail. And we need to give greater trust and support to teachers to find new solutions. We cannot expect that by replicating lessons from the past, that these are going to work in times that look very different. So how can we actually help teachers to find new ways, new responses on what people learn, on how people learn, on where people learn, and on when they learn? These are key questions that we are facing at the moment. And we believe that teachers are the ones that are teachers and school leaders. It's the schools that are best placed to find new solutions to these big questions. And the good news is that while we might think that the teachers are typically opposed to innovations, actually, when we asked them in TAVIS back in 2018, 4 out of 5 said that they were striving to find new ideas for teaching and learning, and that they were open to change. When we also asked principals whether they supported teachers through these changes and through this innovation, we observed that just 59% of them do so. So there might be a chance for school leaders to step in and to support and give the level of trust, confidence, and support that teachers might need to carry out these innovations in these challenging times. And whilst technology can be a good medium, a good solution in these current times, we know that technology is only good as it is used. And what we know from the past, from the previous world, is that only, I think it's 53% of teachers used to let their students use ICTs for project work in OECD countries. This was not the case in some countries, like for example, in Denmark or New Zealand, where more than 80% or more teachers let their students use ICTs for their project or class work. But in some countries, like in Japan, this was just less than 20% of teachers. And it's in these environments where there was no tradition of using ICTs, where it might be more challenging in present times to make use of them. We also know that it's the younger teachers, the ones that are likely to be better prepared to face these challenging situations, because in their formal preparation programs, most of them report that ICT for teaching was included in the curriculum. And we also know that training can make a difference, whether it's training through the formal initial teacher education program, or whether it's a special ad hoc training programs to support teachers in the use of ICTs. What we observe in TAVIS is that teachers that say that they attended a training program, that they were trained in the use of ICTs for teaching, they are more likely, they are significantly more likely to make use of ICTs in the classroom. So this is good news, because this means that there is something that we can do to support teachers through these times. And also, when we ask teachers whether they receive ICT training, 60% said yes, and 18% of them said that this was an area for great or high need development. And this is one of the areas where teachers report the greatest need for development. So it's one of the areas where teachers perceive that they are the weakest, together with special needs education, together with catering to students' special needs. And as you can see, it's the yellow line, and it's much further than other matters, like, for example, communicating with people from different cultures or countries, or approaches to individualized learning. But of course, training in these times might look very different from what training used to be in the past. We know that most training was conducted through courses and seminars. Teachers also reported that they were trained through the reading of professional literature and that they attended education conferences. These were the prevailing forms of training in the past. And what we see is that the options that are available now, which are more related to digital training environments, like online courses or seminars, were not very much used. Only 36% of the teachers that were surveyed in Davis reported that they had attended a training program online. And I would like to make here a bigger point, because technology is not about how we are teaching students. Technology can also be a great enabler for teachers. It can empower teachers to make the most of the digital world, for example, to foster greater collaboration with peers, to share resources, and to give and receive feedback. And while the figure was 36% on average across the OECD, we observe a considerable number of differences in countries like, for example, in Shanghai, China. This figure is much, much, much higher, and almost all teachers were already being trained online. We see that online training, it's the orange round ball here, and it varies a lot across the countries that took part of the TAVIS survey. And as I was saying, technology can help to accelerate and to amplify collaboration among teachers, and well beyond the boundaries of their schools. And I think that here we need to think in an ambitious way. And for example, think about ways in which we are now behaving in other aspects of our lives, like, for example, in online markets, where people can share cars, can share even their apartments with total strangers. And I was giving here the example of Shanghai, where I think it's almost 95% of teachers actually have benefit from online training, because Shanghai is already using the power of the online world to support the teaching profession. Many teachers use a digital platform where they can share their lesson plans. And the more teachers that download, that provide feedback, and to improve the lessons of others, the greater the reputation that a teacher can gain on that platform. At the end of the school year, the principal will not just ask the teacher how well they taught their students, but it will also ask the school principal will also ask the teacher, what did the teacher do to support the peers across the Shanghai school system? How much did the teacher engage into that platform? And these sort of online platforms for teachers to collaborate and to learn from each other open new opportunities, open a big opportunity to create a giant open source community where the best ideas can flourish, and where teachers can can share the best resources and benefit from the resources of others for the benefit of all. And of course, today, best value is created vertically by prescribing teachers what to do in the classroom, what to share with their students, how to prepare their lesson plans. Today, the greatest value in education and in other sectors is created horizontally by connecting and empowering them to share and to learn from each other. And I would like to share with you an initiative that we have developed at the OECD exactly to enable that, exactly to enable teachers to connect to each other from different parts of the world, to work with each other and to share inspiring new teaching ideas. We have created the Global Teaching Insights platform, which will be released publicly on 16th of November, where teachers will be able to watch how teachers from different places in the world teach through videos. They will be able to find examples of impactful, inspiring, and innovative teaching practices. And they will not just be able to consume, to watch, but they will be able to engage, to share their own insights with a global community of peers. And this is an opportunity to, for example, take classroom observation to a global scale. At the moment, classroom observation is most of the times limited to seeing peers in your own school, to seeing peers in nearby schools, but few teachers or school leaders have had the chance to actually see how teachers in other countries teach. And what we want to do at the OECD is bring this opportunity to every teacher and school leader, no matter what school they teach in or where their school is located. And for example, they will be able to see examples of teachers fostering multiple ways of reasoning or encouraging students to work with each other in the classroom and engage as well in commenting on these aspects, in sharing these aspects, in sharing their experiences, and in engaging in the sort of professional dialogue that can take the body of knowledge further. And this is particularly important in the current times when what we see is that we need new solutions. And instead of having teachers come up with new solutions everywhere in different ways, there is an opportunity to connect them and to help them see solutions that have taken place in other schools, in other settings, and learn from each other, adapt the solutions, add to the solutions, and create the level of enrichment and sharing that can help every professional. And what we want to do in this project is actually to do an open call to every school leader and to every teacher that might want to share the innovations, to share the new practices that have been put in place in their schools during these challenging COVID times, and that they think that can make a lasting impact into the school system. We are at the moment collecting examples of how teachers have managed through this new challenging context to create an emotional safe space and to help develop the skills of resilience that are most important than ever, how they are tackling learning gaps and differences in learning gaps in their student bodies, how they are building the classrooms for the future, how they are changing what the classroom looks like. So if you have any innovations that could be of interest, please do not hesitate to share them. I'm sure that there are other teachers and other school leaders in other parts of the world that will be very interested in learning about them. I would like to make a couple of further points about the current challenges and opportunities that this crisis is creating. One of the important pieces in the equity puzzle that we have been discussing for many years is how do we attract the most talented teachers to the most disadvantaged schools where they must, or where their talent must be might be more needed. And what we observe is that most school systems are struggling still with this question. And what we observe is that the novice teachers, the new teachers, are the ones that are most likely or are overrepresented in the most disadvantaged schools. What you see here in the chart is in red, the percentage of teachers that are in socioeconomically disadvantaged schools. And where the level of disadvantage is lower than 30%, there are less novice teachers than where the level of disadvantage is greater than 30%. And it's similar if instead of disadvantage, we look on whether students have an immigrant background. In schools where there are more students with an immigrant background, more than 10%, we observe that there is a higher number of novice teachers, that novice teachers are overrepresented in the most challenging contexts. And while the novice teachers might be more familiar with ICTs, they are facing particularly hard challenges in these times of COVID in this context. And schemes like mentoring schemes, like pairing them with more experienced teachers are most important than ever. And what we observe is that few of the novice teachers have a mentor. So there is an opportunity there to make sure that every new teacher feels supported in these very difficult times. But of course, it's not just novice teachers, the ones that are going through high levels of stress and anxiety to be able to deliver and support their students. It's all teachers. And this, for school leaders, calls for thinking on or rethinking on what is the greatest human aspects of the job, and how can we support teachers through these very, very tough times. And learning always happens through interaction in an environment, and well-being and self-efficacy of learners and teachers are paramount. And how in these difficult times of distancing can we make sure that such connections, such relationships do not break, and that such relationships are reinforced, and that we create caring and socio-emotional supportive environments. One of the issues that we observe in the TAVIS survey is that we ask teachers what were the type of activities, work tasks that stress them the most. And it's exactly what you see here in the chart. We look into 4 types of activities or tasks. We look into teaching tasks, so facing the students. We look into marking the student work, in the individual planning and preparation of lessons, and we also look on whether the general administrative work. What we observe is that by far the task that stresses the most teachers is administrative work. All the administrative requests, all the work that they have to do for administrative purpose generates much more stress than teaching, marking student works, or planning their lessons. So in these times of crisis where teachers are very well stressed, it's more important than ever to try to reduce the administrative workload that is allocated to them and that they have to do. And this might help increase their well-being or reduce the pressure that falls on them in these hard times. And what about the school principals? How are you dealing with high levels of stress, of uncertainty, and disconcert? What this crisis brings is perhaps most to the forefront is the need for effective leadership in education. at every level of the system. We need to accept that these initial weeks of school reopenings are going to be a chaos. That there will be chaos at the macro level, at the institutional level, and at the individual level for schools and for their communities. But it's also during this great uncertainty that people are going to look to hang on something that they feel as secure, as trusted to restore order. And this is likely to be school leaders. School leaders, because school leaders are those that can immediately address the needs of learners and their families. School leaders are those that can also prepare the schools in ways where the wall of learning is going to go back to a normality. Support teachers in making the changes that are needed to embrace this new normality. And school leaders, what we have observed is that have been very quick to establish crisis teams, to provide daily social media updates to their communities. And they are also trying to own and support the professionals through this challenging time. It's these school leaders that have been engaged and stood up to the greatest challenges, despite the stress, despite the uncertainty, those that are likely to support their faculty and their communities the most. And it's difficult times where what we observe is that it's perhaps an opportunity for school leaders as well to stay connected. And I started this conversation, this conference, by telling you that I'm particularly grateful for the organizers for bringing us together today. And I believe that there is a greater scope for school leaders to collaborate. According to the data that we have collected, what we observe is that just 37% of the school principals who took part in the TAVIS survey reported that they engage in collaboration with other school principals on challenging tasks, and just 37%. And I believe that this time that requires us to do extraordinary tasks, to find out, to go out of our ways to be able to meet the needs of our communities, to meet the needs of our teachers, to meet the needs of our students. These extraordinary times also require more than ever support from each other, collaboration from each other. And I'm sure that once we're going to go back to school principals and ask them about their opportunities to collaborate through these challenging times in the TAVIS survey, I'm sure that this figure is going to be much larger. And I think that opportunities like the one that you have today to connect with your peers, to support each other, are extremely important through these times. And as much as these opportunities to connect and to collaborate can be a great way to find immediate responses to urgent problems, I think that it's also good to get together to think further ahead and to think about the future of education. This moment requires system leaders. It requires leaders that can look beyond the particular interests and habits that might have been created for over a long time, and that can look at what should education look like tomorrow. How can we effectively transform our systems? What are the directions that should be envisaged? Some colleagues at the OECD have just released a new report, which is about scenarios for the future of education. And I would like to share them with you here to give you some food for thought. These scenarios are not new. They were already there before the pandemic. They reflect previous trends. But this can push us to think through plausible outcomes in reschooling and deschooling. These trends that were already existing and that have been further exacerbated now with the pandemic are, of course, the digital technologies, the expansion of learning markets, more increasingly active parents, and the growing investment um, in the personalization of learning. And my colleagues say that the best way to think through these four scenarios is to imagine yourself that you meet with someone coming from Mars, someone that has nothing to do with planet Earth, that doesn't know our schools, that doesn't know our classrooms. And imagine that you are just to recommend this Martian what to do, how to imagine education. What is the type of education that they should be building in Mars? What is that you will recommend to this Martian? First question might be, should we depart the reflection from our current classrooms and our current schools, or should we imagine something completely different? It's really up to you, the answer, and I hope that this will help spur some thinking. One of the scenarios that they propose is how to extend schooling. The second one is how to outsource education, how to create learning hubs where resources can be shared, and how to make schooling as a learning continuity, as learning as you go. These are four scenarios to think about. And whilst we are now collapsing, finding immediate responses to urgent needs, it's also good to take a few moments to think about it and to try to take actions and align our actions to the future that we want to create. I would like to end by saying that the COVID-19 pandemic has forced schools across the world to change, to adapt, to experiment, to the extent that we had never seen before. Schools have been closed. And while this is a major stress test for the education system, for the school leaders, for teachers, for students, I believe that this has also been an opportunity to rethink on what are the fundamentals of education, an opportunity to take the best of ourselves, to find solution, and to acknowledge what we do not want to see from the old normality. And it's this disruption what can bring us the silver lining of the future. And overall, as I was saying before, this crisis has been about the digital world, has been about technology, has been about virtual. But I believe that what it has really been about is about professionals. It's about the people that were behind making this possible. And whilst we might be masked and we might be distanced through Zoom, through virtuality, this is really about professionalism. This is really about standing up to the challenge. And in the country where I live, in France, just 1 out of 4 teachers said in 2018, when we asked them about it, that they felt recognized and valued by society. I believe that if we were to ask them again today, I hope that a far larger number would respond that they are valued by society. In France, every night during confinement, people got out in their balconies and they applaud the health workers for being at the front line, for supporting us through this crisis. I didn't hear any applause for teachers and for school leaders that were equally making the greatest of the efforts to support their students and their communities through these times. And I would like to end this conference by applauding you, by really applauding you for all the work and professionalism that you have shown through these times. And apart from applauding you, I would like to share a few other resources for further reading about the COVID. If you go to the OECD site related to the coronavirus, you will be able to find several publications related to the evidence that we have collected, the OECD Harvard survey, the TAVIS survey, the scenarios for further thinking. And I hope that these materials can support you or can give you food for thought in these very uncertain and challenging times. Thank you very much to all of you. Please stay safe. And again, thank you again for all your work and professionalism through this pandemic.